Hello there, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you are taking in this edition of Cross's Corner. I'm Martin Cross, and with me I have the amazing Erin Kennedy, who has got one hell of a story to tell, which I'm sure a lot of you know already, which is probably why you're watching this as it is. But it's lovely to have you here, Erin.
Yeah, it's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. So, how has your day been today? Tell us, have you been at Caversham?
Yeah, I've been at Caversham. I've been in a rigging matrix this morning. We've been getting our Tokyo boat ready. So essentially, we have kind of multiple boats that we train and race in, and this is kind of our creme de la creme boat until we get our new boat for Paris next year. So I've been doing, I don't know, foot angles, spans, pitches. Oh, I mean, I've been doing all sorts. So yeah, I've literally been doing rigging for about 2 days, but it's finally done.
Does your coach not do anything of that?
Yeah, my coach Nicholas, she's been helping me quite a bit, but it's been such a mammoth job, and we've also had sessions on the water that I've been doing it while she's been off coaching, and then she's come off coaching and then come to help me. So yeah, it's been busy.
Yeah, yeah. Now I know some of the para team have raced recently in Paris, and you obviously weren't there. But what was the feedback there from the course and such like?
Yeah, I think that the course has definitely got a feel of Tokyo, even kind of bit Dorney and sort of Nottingham with the kind of there's quite a lot of the big boat hard area right out in front. So there's plenty of space. And then yeah, interestingly on the course, really variable winds. They were saying kind of some of the crews that were doing the best were the ones who were unsurprisingly managing it the best. But yeah, they were sort of like it's like cross head tail cross head tail cross 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 or whatever, every 250. So it's really one that you're going to need to be on your toes for, I think, and yeah, just ready for anything.
Did that whet your appetite when you heard about that for the Paris?
Yeah, I think for me, I it's actually something that my old coach used to say, Christine Wilson. She always used to say that essentially, like the racing conditions on the day are your best conditions. They're the ones you're going to thrive in the most, and that's the way you're like mentally prepare for it. Is that it's not like, oh, I only row well in a tailwind. It's like you're like, no, I'll row whatever the conditions are on the day, and I'll make them my perfect conditions.
Mm. Yeah, I mean that's pretty sound. A bit of a new look crew for you this season.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to be honest, we've had quite a lot of change. Well, we had basically the same crew sort of 19, 20, 21. And then we had sort of Foxy and left, and Ed came in, and now kind of Ollie's left, and we've got Morgan coming in. So we're kind of changing quite a lot. Me and G are kind of the two people left currently from Tokyo, and then Frankie Allen's in for Ellen at the moment as well. So there's loads going on, and like me and G are looking at each other, going like, oh, the average age of this crew's gone down quite a lot. We're both in our 30s, and they're like, Morgan's 19, so it's pretty terrifying.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, maybe you could just run through and give us an idea of your crew and their personalities.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely say that I'm probably the most extroverted. The crew is definitely head down, crack on sort of crew. So Ed is an incredibly talented athlete. He has hemophilia, which when he was younger had led to kind of bone bleeds and internal bleeds, which led to ankle fusion, which is why he classifies for Paralympics. Yeah, he's an incredibly talented sculler. He won Nat Schools, and we need to get this right. He won Nat Schools in the single and the champ single twice.
Wow.
And he's an amazing sculler, but we've switched him off to sweep. Yeah, he's currently doing a degree at Reading whilst he's training with us. And then you've got G, who I mentioned before, and she's been in the crew since 2017. And she's an absolute savage, to be honest with you. She is an unbelievable athlete. Yeah, she just she's had a week or two out of the boat, and she literally just yesterday just jumped on and did an absolutely savage ergo, just being like, yeah, first session back on an ergo, go on then.
Wow.
And she's a beast. Then you've got Frankie. Frankie joined the crew same time as Ed, after the games in Tokyo. We call her the trucker because she just, well, I don't want to say she doesn't get injured, but it's more like her mentality, and she just literally just does sessions. She just trucks on throughout sessions. She's just a bit of a savage, to be honest, which is what you want. She's at Brooks, just finishing off a physio degree.
Yeah.
Then we've got Morgan, who is brand new to the crew this year. He's 19, but so he has a visual impairment, and he is really smooth. Like, he is learning, he's been basically thrown in the deep end with the crew, but he's taken it all in his stride amazingly well, and he's really smooth in the middle of the boat, which is amazing. And he's like been a sponge this year, just trying to learn from everybody and just keep adding value to the crew. So it's really interesting. It's really, really different. We've got kind of completely different sort of personalities that we had in Tokyo to now. And that's part of the fun, I think, blending a crew. And we've got a new coach in Nicola Benavente as well. So it's a lot of change, but with that becomes a lot of opportunity, and it's going well. We got a new world best time this season. So
yeah, how is it working with Nicola?
Yeah, it's really good. I think it's actually, so Nick's coached that crew since, oh gosh, so Nick Baker is now the chief coach. He was the kind of high performance coach before that, and he's coached the four all the way through the Rio cycle and the Tokyo cycle. And I think it's been a really great opportunity for him to get a change, scenery, and he's down as coaching the PR3 mixed double and Ben, our PR1 single, and Nicola to come in and sort of make her mark on the four. She coaches in a really different way. She's a lot more she brings loads of different exercises, and she really sticks on one kind of really big overarching theme. Like, we're working really hard on kind of hip drive at the moment, but like we've been working on that for a while, and she has like an endless bank of like, okay, let's try this, and we're all trying to do the same thing. We've been trying to do the same thing for a while, but she's really, really good at keeping variety whilst sort of banging on about the same thing, and with a new combination, that's what we need, to be honest. We've got to get the basics right. So yeah, I'm really enjoying working with her, and it's probably new for her as well, because she's working in sweep but also working with the cocks. So yeah, we've been kind of working on how we function best together, and yeah, it's been going really well. I'm really enjoying it.
And what do you bring to the crew, Erin?
I think I try and bring, experience. I often feel like I was new to rowing because I came in late, as a lot of rowers go. I started when I was 19, but now I'm actually quite old. So I've been in rowing for a while, since 2011 now. But I think I bring a lot of experience, I hope, and I would like to think, I bring a lot of confidence to the crew, and that they're doing the right thing. And I drive standards quite hard. I try and hold myself to those as well, just physical standards and how we want to be as a team. And and I just really enjoy kind of being a part of a kind of dynamic multi kind of men and women. We've got different PR categories, all those sorts of things, and I think that kind of brings a variety to the day, which for a cox, I definitely do a lot more different things as a cox than I would if I was just a club cox or was in the Olympic program.
Yeah, I was talking to someone at the weekend, and they were sort of suggesting the idea of a mixed day in the Olympics as a possibility. Of course, you've got experience of rowing with mixed crews. I mean, how does it work?
Yeah, we row mixed crews, and it's weird because it just sort of feels normal, but it was interesting because we had an under 23. They're all down ready at Caversham, prepping for their championships in a couple of weeks. And we row mixed pairs all the time, and we just set off the pair, and then they're like, "Excuse me, how does that work?" And I was like, Oh, yeah, and to be fair, yeah, that's quite weird actually. You wouldn't often see a mixed pair. So I was like, oh, okay, we gear it like this, and so, obviously we try and, we never put the boy in the bows, because, that's going to mess up with the steering and things like that. But yeah, I think a mixed crew is great because, um, men and women potentially, from my experience at least, like approach the stroke sometimes slightly differently. Obviously we've got different power outputs in different seats, but you have that in an 8 as well, you have that in a normal 4. It's just the range is maybe sometimes a little bit greater, and it's how can we get the best out of the boat. I think that mixed boats would be really fun, and I think that, there's been chat for years about, rowing needs to diversify and do different things, but so it's the same for other sports, but mixed competition is starting to get there. Like, I mean, triathlon had mixed relay at the games last year, as did, there was a mixed relay in swimming as well. So I think, like, it's definitely possible. Like, we row all the time, and it's absolutely kind of, it's not really a challenge, but I think it would make it really fun.
Yeah. Now, you kind of want to talk about, the various races you've had in your career and so on. But I'd kind of like to get into, your story and what's happened to you over the past year and a bit. I know that you've told it, and written about it. How do you feel when you're telling the story? And what sort of reactions do you get?
Um, yeah, I mean, when I tell the story, it genuinely feels like you're telling a story about someone else. It
Mm,
doesn't really feel real, to be honest. Doesn't feel like it happened to me. Um, and I can honestly say it's been the fastest year of my entire life. We're suddenly in 23 and we've got the games next year, and it's like, oh my goodness. But yeah, like the reactions are fairly mixed. Like, if people kind of don't know me and don't know rowing, they think I'm a bit of a nutter for like carrying on rowing and competing. Um, and for those who are in rowing, and when I'm talking about it, like, I think probably they get it a bit more maybe. Um,
mm,
Rowing is a lifestyle choice, really. It's not really just a sport. It's so much more than that. And so I think, my decision to keep competing and to stay as involved in the sport as I could while I was going through treatment, it's probably unsurprising maybe to rowers,
yeah,
even if it is, to maybe the general public.
yeah. Um, where do you choose? How do you work out where to begin your story when you're telling it?
Yeah, it sort of depends on the situation, really. But I mean, I think like the easiest way to sort of dive in is essentially like I genuinely was fitter and healthier than I'd ever been off the back of Tokyo, and I'd had a couple of months off. I was doing really well and found a lump on training camp. And I think, the weirdest thing that I can sort of explain to anyone, if particularly if they have cancer, a cancer diagnosis, like in the way that I did, was you literally have someone saying to you from one minute to the next, you perceive yourself to be well and healthy, and then someone goes, actually, you're really quite poorly. Um, and it doesn't quite compute. I think that was one of the things I found quite hard to get my head around at the beginning, because I was like, I'm fine. Like, I feel well. It was very odd. And it was partly because I caught the cancer really early, but also breast cancer in its kind of primary stages doesn't necessarily start to kind of impact you too greatly until it
Mm,
starts to go metastatic, and it's still until it starts to kind of go to other places in your body, and that's when it starts to get quite serious. Well, it was already very serious. It starts to get very, very serious. And yeah, so I think that was very bizarre. Like, my bloods were normal, I had energy, I was absolutely fine. And just knowing that chemo is going to make you really sick is a real weird one to get your head around. You have to get poorly to get better.
mm. So, I read somewhere that you were kind of forewarned because there'd been a history or family
Yeah,
history
yeah,
of illness.
yeah. There's I've now discovered that in my family there's a BRCA gene, which means you're sort of it's a genetic mutation in BRCA, which means that you have a kind of more increased chance than normal of the general population to kind of develop breast cancer. And there was family history in my family, but what was sort of throwing us a little bit was my nana on my dad's side, my dad's mum. She'd been tested for BRCA and she was negative, so that was a sort of curveball for us all. And I had actually it was just before COVID, submitted some papers to basically request genetic testing. But then because of COVID and everything, things sort of fall by the wayside, non-emergency medical stuff. And, I didn't chase it either, to be honest, because you never think it will happen to you. So there was a little bit of that. And I had family members who'd had cancer in their 30s. But, I beat them. Always competitive. I snuck in at my 20s.
So when you found a lump, was there ever any sort of doubt in your mind about following it up?
I think the initial doubt is less about following it up, but more just hoping that you were wrong. And I don't know about, anyone's had any sort of medical thing, whether it's a lump, whether it's it's a cough, it's a whatever. You notice it and then you're like, nah, it'll be fine. And then all you do is notice it. Like, then it's like, as soon as I noticed it, it could have grown in size by 5 centimeters, because whenever I moved, I'd be like, oh, I think I feel it. I sit there, so I was sort of like, I've got to get this checked. And it was really insignificant. Like, I think I was quite lucky where it was, which was essentially sort of, it sat quite high up on my rib cage, where almost right at the start of where breast tissue actually starts. So it was quite easy to feel against my chest wall. Had it been in another place, it would have probably been a lot harder to find, because it was in terms of the size and things like that.
Yeah, and so I know that you had tests and biopsies, and then I think it was very striking the way you described going to find out the results of those tests.
Yeah, it was really really surreal. So I was due to fly to the first World Cup of the year in Belgrade in Serbia, and I literally was like, that was just mad. I've been on the GB rowing team since 2017. This was going to be my first World Cup. Due to injuries, illness, COVID, I was like, I'm finally going to the first World Cup. And then we were only Australia had entered. So we were like, oh, for goodness sake. But Australia were over and they were really keen. We have quite a good relationship with their coaches. And we basically said what the reason they were basically going to have to withdraw was their cocks caught COVID a week before while they were on training camp in Italy. I, at the time, was trialing against Alex Wenyon, Molsey Cox, and she was in the team. I'd been selected for that regatta, and then they chatted to World Rowing, whatever, and then we were like, we can lend you Alex, we can lend you a Cox, because we both wanted to get the value of racing out of it. So I was like, oh man, is there anything else? What next, sort of thing. And then obviously I need this follow-up appointment the day that we were due to fly to Serbia, and so I said, can I fly a day late? And I really specifically remember sort of all being in one of the rooms in Caversham, and one of the team asks, if it's bad news, like, have you thought about that? Like, would you really want to go? Like, yeah, I do, because like, what else am I going to do? I'm just going to be sat at home feeling sorry for myself. And I was like, well, they're not going to start chemo in the next 3 days, so I think just go. Probably fairly flippantly. And then when I obviously did get diagnosed, my first thought was, oh, okay, well, some people have this, but they don't have to have chemo. I'll just have some surgery and it'll be fine. And then literally, his next words were, and you'll be having chemo. And I was like, oh. And I really was thinking about, my career and my kind of next year or two. And one of the reasons I really, really wanted to go to Serbia was quite darkly, I didn't know if that would be my last ever race. That could have been it.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, well, I just didn't know if it might have been I didn't have much idea of the prognosis at the time. Literally, we were really, really early on. You barely know anything when you're first diagnosed, and I was just like, this might be my last race. Like, you know, not necessarily like I might die, but just like I might never come back. Like I might be really poorly for a really long time. Paris will come and go. You know, I'm not 19. I'm not 20. You know, I'm in my late 20s, early 30s. Would I, you know, all these things are like firing through your head at the time, and you're just trying to kind of process everything, and you've got not really got a clue. And I remember coming out, and I spoke to my mum and dad. My husband Sam spoke to his parents, and then I was like, I call Anne, really. So I called Anne Grave, our team doctor. And she was just so lovely. And then I spoke to Tom Dyson, our chief coach, because he was out there already. He was our chief coach, sorry, and now he's sort of the performance director's right hand man. And then it's so heavy. It's so heavy telling people. That's all I'd say. So rough. And he was like, do you want me to speak to Nick? And I was like, yeah, please. I can't talk to anymore. And then I just sent a WhatsApp to the team. And I just said, look, this is what I know, which is I've got cancer. I'm going to have treatment. You know, they're looking to treat to cure. That's what they kind of said, but that's all I know. And this is what I need from you. I was basically like, I don't want are you okays. I don't want lots of hugs. I just want to do my job. And so I went to Belgrade, weirdly, probably of the 80 people that were there, staff and athletes, maybe 15 knew. Great. I just turned up and people just treated me like normal. And then I kind of told a couple of friends on the team. I remember I told Tom Ford, and he just came and sat. We'd had some food or whatever. We just sat in the lobby. He was like, "You all right?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've got cancer." And he was like, "What?" I was like, yeah, it's kind of hard to keep it in, you know. I need to work on the delivery. And like, you know, and he was like, you okay? I was like, I think so. He's like, when did you find out? I was like, yesterday. And he's like, what?
Yeah.
But you know, it's just sort of, it was a really great distraction, actually. It was just, yeah. And I held it right together, did the podium, and then Ben gave me a massive hug afterwards, and he was like, you can't stop me now. And I was just, yeah, then I was in bits, but I was all right until then.
Yeah. So when did you start to be able to map out any sort of trajectory for that year and what you could do and couldn't do?
It took a while, to be honest. So I kind of carried on turning up to training just as normal. You know, your diary all of a sudden gets full of appointments. I did fertility preservation at Guy's Hospital in London, so that was quite.
Was that something that they said, okay, you need to do this early on?
Yeah, it's if you want to. It's very much kind of individual choice, but for me, it's something that, you know, I do want a family in the future, and if my family isn't biological, then that's fine. But I would like to, you know, give myself the best opportunity because basically chemo attacks cells that duplicate quickly and can have a really, you know, can essentially render you infertile as a woman. And I was having 15 rounds, so you know it was going to be pretty rough. And as well as that, then I was going to be put on something called Zoladex, which is it basically artificially induces the menopause, but sometimes it can just keep you there. Like it triggers the body into thinking like, oh, this is what we're doing now, and then you're in the menopause. So that kind of risk of fertility was quite high, and that was probably one of the most stressful times. I actually felt it quite emotional being back at Henley last week? Yeah, a week before, because at that time I was going through fertility preservation. I was injecting twice a day, doing all of this sort of thing, and it really felt really real at Henley. And I saw a lot of friends. By then I'd sort of come public about it, and I saw a lot of people that, you know, you only see at Henley, and everyone's like, oh my gosh. And, you know, it all of a sudden felt like I'd kept the worlds quite separate. And all of a sudden sort of my cancer world and my real life was starting to merge. And yeah, I was pretty scared at Henley, to be honest, last year. You know, I had a lot ahead of me. And so yeah, definitely this year is kind of funny feelings being back. Good feelings, but back some funny memories. And it was only when I basically met my oncologist, which would have been start of July, that we really started to nut out, okay, what does this actually look like and what's going to be doable?
Yeah. Um, you mentioned letting people know. One of the things you did, which was very striking, was you used social media. What lay behind that decision for you?
Um, it it's really easy to look with hindsight and give you a really clear answer. Like, oh well. But in all honesty, I sort of in those few weeks, I pretty much kept it on the down low for about a month. Um, Obviously, close friends and family knew. Um, it's horrible telling people, to be honest, because obviously for you, yes, it comes out of the blue a bit, but you've gone for the check, you've had the biopsies, you sort of know. Whereas that person that you don't see all that often, or you're not going to tell them, oh, by the way, I'm getting something checked. That comes out of the blue for them quite a lot, and I think that's quite rough. So it had been a good couple of weeks, and I sort of felt it was kind of odd, because I sort of felt like I was like struggling to kind of live two lives almost. Like there was the life that I actually was experiencing, all these hospital appointments, a lot of fear about what was coming, and then there was everyone. Let's say at Caversham, there was maybe by that point a third of people knew, but I'm not on best mate terms with obviously everyone at training, because there's just so many of us, and so there was people that wouldn't have known, and there was a bit of a consciousness around one, like being able to just tell everyone the same information, and if you control the narrative, people then know exactly what's happening, rather than filling the blanks in with their own this and things like that. There was a bit of reality of I didn't want to just disappear from the international scene. There was a bit of me which I was like, I don't want any like young whippersnappers to be like coming from my seat. Like, I'm coming back. Like, don't.
Yeah.
I'm not retiring. I'm not just disappearing here. I've not been deselected. So there's a bit of like pride and a bit of that. And then I think there was also I know a friend who's had someone, it was about 10-15 years ago, and they set up like an email thread, of all their nearest and dearest, to be able to update them on, oh, okay, so what's happened, good news and general updates, because actually talking to people and filling them in is really time consuming. And there was a bit of me, I was like, if I can just like direct them to one place, that could be quite useful.
Yeah.
So it ended up being sort of a range of different things, really. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to be really open about it, because the other thing that I felt really passionate about, and still really do, is that I only knew I had breast cancer because I proactively found it myself. And you don't think it will happen to you. I had medical history, I had family history, I had all of the odds were against me. I didn't even know about the BRCA gene at that point, but I still only found it for that reason. I still didn't think it would happen to me. And so by talking about it and destigmatizing it, and people started to follow and be really interested and hopefully like learn, okay, what is it like to be 29, fit and healthy, and be diagnosed with cancer and have chemo? Like, I tried to kind of share. I found it really enjoyable, actually, to be honest. Everyone's like, was it a bit much? I was like, kind of, it was quite cathartic, and also like it was kind of funny. Some funny things that came up, and I was like for example, having chemo in the winter sucks because you lose all your nose hair. And like one of the most irritating parts of chemo, which you wouldn't think, is your nose is like a tap constantly. And it's just like sharing things like that, being like, do you know what, guys, actually, on TV, they'll be like, oh, it's this. I'm like, no, it's not. It's just you're blowing your nose all the time, and your nose is red, and it's not sexy, it's not glamorous, it's just what it is, and it's really irritating. And I ended up, social media is amazing because you end up creating this community of people around you who are just like your little cheerleaders, and it's been amazing, to be honest. I've not regretted it at all, and I think it all went a bit mad for me after the Europeans, and my story sort of started getting out there, and it made me realize actually how many people it is helping, and how it's not just for me anymore, it was for other people as well, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that's really striking. when did you realize that you could do another event? And were you having chemo before that event?
Yeah, so I did
And
that on chemo.
and how was that?
It was a bit mad. So I was on what's called EC. So anyone who's had breast cancer, we're very familiar with EC because it is like the bulldozer they run you over with before they start to do the more specialized chemotherapies. Because even that's something I didn't even know. I just thought chemotherapy was like, here's your chemotherapy, but it's an umbrella term like the word painkiller. There's a multitude of things used for a multitude of reasons. But EC is what most people with breast cancer will start on. And actually, weirdly, I only had 4, but there is a restricted number of rounds that you can have because there is a restricted number of doses you can ever have in your lifetime because it is so bad.
Ah.
So it was working really well. And I was like, why can't I just stay on EC? And they were like, because if it comes back, we need to save some doses for future Erin if we ever need them, because there's so much of it you can have in your lifetime. Otherwise it's so bad for you. And yeah, so I'd had 2 rounds of EC. And I think after I was like, I can do it. I can make it happen. My oncologist was talking to Anne. We were trying to make sure it was all possible. I was feeling like pretty good. But it was the proof in the pudding was really sort of how did I respond to chemo? And my first round of chemo, I mean, it was such bad timing because I literally had my surgery to remove the eggs on the Tuesday, and then I had chemo on the Wednesday.
No.
And we had a heat wave, and I was so hot. It was like, and so actually, round 2 of chemo felt so much better because I wasn't feeling the effects of general anesthetic, and it wasn't like 32 degrees. But I was just like, I'm gonna be an athlete about this if I can. I'm literally gonna eat well, sleep well, prep everything, and try and approach this really, really methodically. And it was after I'd had like a full round of chemo, we were like, okay, this is doable. We checked that my oncologist was okay with it and everything, and she was on board. And it also helped. We were going to Germany, so worst case scenario, if there was some sort of medical emergency, we're in somewhere with really good healthcare. We're not in another kind of nation where we might have struggled to get me to a hospital quickly or something. And then when we were out at Euros, I had my own room, which was really useful. And I essentially eat, sleep, row, repeat sort of routine. I just didn't do anything else, to be honest. We did play some card games and things like that, but normally we're like, oh, should we pull to the supermarket? Oh, should we go for a run? I was like, I'm not wasting any energy on anything else. But it was good. It felt really good to be there and to be racing, and it felt really poignant. And I knew it was going to be my last race. We knew that the world champs. To be honest, I think I could have physically done it. Practically, it was just not doable because I was in weekly treatment at that point. And also, it gets to the point where you're like, when are you doing this for selfish reasons? Like, is this impacting the team? And the answer 100% would have been yes. People would have been worried. Even if I was feeling okay, people would have been worrying about me. There would have been a bit of like, what if Erin gets ill? What if she can't do it? And it would have been really selfish. And I say that really easily now. I really found it hard to step away.
Did you?
Oh, it was really tough. Morgan Bayman Williams stepped in for me, and I've known Morgan for years and years, and so it was like the best situation it could have been because GB weren't sending a women's 8. She was the selected women's cox. It meant she got a world championships. She's a fantastic cox. I knew they'd be in really, really safe hands. She'd probably kind of give us some, new insight to the boat and some fresh thinking as well. But it was really hard not being a part of it. And I was pretty low. That was probably the lowest I was, really, just because I guess it's maybe a bit of an insight into what if I don't get better, like what if, I don't get back to racing and stuff. So that was pretty hard. And I was starting to kind of get chased by the symptoms at that point as well.
Symptoms of chemo.
Yeah, the chemo was. I really amazingly was never sick on chemo, which was what I was really worried about.
Yeah.
But it's the fatigue and the brain fog was awful. You feel really slow, really like walking through mud.
Yeah. And I know you took the decision to uh, shave your head
Hmm.
rather than wait for your hair to disappear.
Yeah, I cut it. I used to have really long hair.
Mm,
Ironically, I was actually I hadn't cut it since the lockdown because I was growing it really long to donate it to Little Princess Trust. So when I got diagnosed, I was like, oh, well, better get rid of it all then. So I cut it originally to a really short bob, because I knew I and I was right. I think I knew that the long to short would almost be the hardest. It would break the ice because
mm,
then that didn't really feel like me. Um, and then I did try and cold cat for a while, which that's worse than a 2K. I'm going to throw that out there now. It's pretty savage. And it worked for some, doesn't work for others. Unfortunately, it didn't really work that well for me. And so then I kept my hair for a while. It was a look. When I wore a lot of hats. I don't know if you ever watched House of the Dragon, the kind of the HBO Netflix one, but basically there's an aging king who has longish hair, and then it gets thinner and thinner and thinner and
mm.
thinner. And I was watching the series with some friends, and I was like, guys, I think I look like that. I think it's time that I need to shave this off. And actually, for anyone who is watching or anyone who's knows someone who's going through it, I actually found it really liberating in the end.
Mm,
Um, at the beginning, you're just trying to not look ill. You're trying to not be ill. I think it's a bit of a denial thing. Definitely it was for me. I'm fine. I'm not ill. But as you start to feel more ill, and also, people know you're not very well. I was also really obviously aware of not getting poorly, catching COVID, all those sorts of things.
mm.
Actually, I just sort of owned it, and I just thought of went, you know what, I'm just going to shave my head. And people were so nice as well. Obviously, no one's going to be not nice, but people went out of their way to be really nice. John Collins from the team messaged me, and he was
Yeah.
like, I think bald's a really underrated look on a woman. I think you're rocking it. It was just, I really remember that. Like it was really, really nice. And I remember at the beginning, I was really nervous because obviously I was very present on social media by then. I was really nervous to put a bold picture on social media. And now, got to the end, I didn't care. I went to personality and took my wig off because I got hot, But it's a process, and I think as a woman as well, you might as well have a sign behind you saying I've got cancer if you're not very well and you're old and things like that. So it took a lot, but I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad I took a bit of control on it.
Did I see a picture of you at the sports personality show?
Yes, yeah. So I did wear my wig there, but then I took it off for some of it. It's really hot. It was really funny because some people have been following my story. I know people from other sports, and they didn't recognize me with a wig on. So that was quite funny. And then when I took it off, they're like, Erin, I didn't know you were here. And I was like, am I more known now for not having any hair? But yeah, it was good. And again, like there are cancer touches so many of us, and I think at that point I was actually feeling really good about myself. Like I'd finished chemo by then. Had my double mastectomy was around the corner, and I was actually, what? So if I feel really good and really confident, and so I should, why I don't need to wear a wig. I can myself, and I think that's an important message to send as well.
When did you realise that having a double mastectomy would be part of your treatment?
Almost as soon as I got diagnosed with cancer, I was like, I'm having one. I will have one. I was pushing really hard for it. To be fair, my surgeon was incredible. I didn't really need to push very hard at all. She was like, yep, I agree. But, she wanted to make sure I'd considered, it's very well saying it. Doing it's a really different thing. But yeah, I was just like, I'm not messing around. My surgeon was amazing, and she sort of described it in two ways. You know, you need to have some surgery for the cancer that you currently have, but the option is also there to have surgery to safeguard against cancers you may get in the future. So if I wanted a lumpectomy, you know, I may well could have gone down that route. But for me, you know, my lifetime risk of cancer is so high, being my age, with BRCA, with recurrence, all those sorts of things. I was just like, I can have risk reducing surgery, therefore why wouldn't you? And it comes with, you know, one of the things that really gets me, so don't ever say it, anyone who's watching, to anyone who's having done mastectomy, is like, oh, free boob job. You're like, don't say that. And then they say it, and then they look at you, and then they realize they shouldn't have said it, and then you have to laugh. And it's just like, but you know, it's an amputation. It's not an easy surgery. It's a big surgery. But I'm so glad I did. And again, approached it like an athlete. I prehabbed. I tried to kind of get as ready and as fit and healthy as I possibly could before it started. And you know, and I bounced back really quick. Like I got back in a boat in March. So, you know, I was back in a boat in less than 2 months.
So before I ask you about getting back in the boat, how I mean, I suppose because you were so determined on what course you would take, that really helps. But how has it been coping with that operation?
Yeah, definitely kind of knowing that it was what I wanted was key. But the op was massive. Like it was about 8 or 9 hours.
Wow.
And I was in hospital. I did 2 nights in hospital. I'm not gonna lie, I don't remember a lot of being in hospital. I had a lot of morphine. And I watched quite a lot of Downton Abbey. And I was, yeah, I essentially, I think what I hadn't, you do think about it, but you don't think about it. You know, you're like, oh yeah, I know this will happen, but you don't think about the reality. But like, I had to sleep essentially like in the giant pregnancy pillows, because I literally had to sleep on my back for about 3 months. And I had to wear kind of high impact sports bra for about, well, I still sleep in a kind of post mastectomy bra now, and we're you know about 6 months down the line. It's all of those sorts of things. Like it's massively re-alters your chest wall, and your they move your pecs as well. So even back in the gym, you know, I'm only literally in the last week started doing a bit of bench press, and I'm doing it with like 4 kilo dumbbells in each hand, and you know, and all that sort of thing. So it completely reconfigures your upper body, which, I mean, the science, unbelievable they can do that. But it was quite tough, and I made some really, you know, decisions that I'm very happy with. It's very personal, so I decided to not keep my nipples, for example, because it will you can end up with additional breast tissue behind them. And you know, again, I'm doing this, I'm not doing this for cosmetic reasons. I'm doing this to try to stop having breast cancer again. And so I kind of made some quite big decisions. But then the reality of that is, you know, it looks kind of weird. It looks a bit different. And, you know, I'm in a communal changing rooms, I'm at training, and I don't think about it now. And I like to think most of the girls at Caversham probably don't even bat an eyelid. But it's the sort of thing when you're at a World Rowing event, right? And then you get changed and everyone's like, that looks weird. Like, and then you're like, oh yeah, that does look weird to people. And it's taking on those things. And I think you can't take it personally. And I think that maybe has helped with, you know, I've been really open about things because it could save someone else's life down the line. So, you know, that's where I've just tried to kind of take it on the chin a little bit.
When did it become apparent to you that you would get back in the team, and how did that unfold?
I was really nervous because I really actually wanted the mastectomy done in December. But given the amount of chemos I had, my surgeon was like, because ideally it would be a 4 to 6 week window post chemo. And I ended up having it 7 weeks post chemo because Christmas basically fell in the middle. I was also really nervous because with my type of cancer, it will just, once I finished chemo, it would start growing back. So I needed, I just wanted to get on with it basically. And then 1 in 10, I had a mastectomy with a reconstruction, with implant reconstruction. 1 in 10 fail. So it's a really, really high level where your body rejects it, or you have a really major infection or anything like that. So I think probably once I got to towards the end of February, and my drains had been removed, I was getting more mobile, hadn't had an infection, and by that point, if my body didn't want it, my body would have let me know by then. So I sort of got through that bit, and I was like, okay, I think we might be good here. And yeah, getting in the boat for the first time would have been start of March, and that was a really emotional day, to be honest. I hadn't been in the boat since the European Championships. And yeah, really emotional. Really cold and windy, of course it was. And to some extent, like, I was looking around and other people were like, God, bad weather, and then men's forward going out or whatever. And I was like, so happy to be here. What a great day. Like, and it was great because we pushed off the first K. We were, I don't know, doing some pairs rowing or something. And I had a bit of a like, this is cool. Like, I'm back in a boat. And then we turn, and then I'm like, okay, we need to run the exercises. And then just ran the training session like any other training session. And I think that's what's been so amazing about rowing. And I think for anyone who's going through something like this, having normality and consistency and something they know so well, that's definitely got to be, it's a real mental boost. So yeah, it was really cool to be back.
And then I know it was covered in the media and so on, the events around your feelings about competing in the Euros in Bled.
Yeah, that was big. Yeah. We saw each other quite a lot in Bled because it was just a lovely place, and you could walk to the hotel and everything. But I had it, mentally pinned in my, calendar since the beginning, that this is what I want to do. This is where, this is the big aim, and getting back for that. Like, a big target for me was getting on training camp. Like, my coaches had been like, look, you need to be on training camp to be selectable for the season. And so that was a big milestone, getting on that training camp. And Varese is just a lovely part of the world. And it was so nice to be back. And obviously I'd missed that training camp the year before, because that summer, that's when I'd stepped back. And then the Euros was just really emotional. I mean, it helped it was in Bled, so it was just beautiful. And I was just like, pinch me, come on, this is mad. And I kind of held it together. Literally, we finished racing, and then we pulled in. I think even in the boat, Frankie like went behind me, and I sort of gave her a hug, and I was like, oh no, I'm gone. I am gone. And I was gone. We landed. Ed gave me a hug. I was a mess. We saw Shelley, our media manager, and Nicola, and I was absolute wreck, to be honest. And then all the way through press, all the way on the podium, I just think I just let it all go. And it was an amazing experience. I think I just never, you dare to think that you can come back. And like I said, I went to Belgrade thinking this could be my last race. And then I was at the Euros before, and it just happened that then when Bled was literally a year to the day that I got diagnosed, which is just, if you wrote it in a book, someone would be like, oh, that's a bit not believable, is it?
A year to the day.
Yeah. The competition started a year to the day I was diagnosed. So yeah, really weird. And then, it was a year I literally, I did fertility preservation, 15 chemos, double mastectomy, and and then back in a boat. And it was just, yeah, it was very cool. It meant so much. And but then on the flip side, like Varese, our World Cup that we just went to, was, I loved it in another way, because actually then I'd sort of got that bit done. I'd done my first race. Morgan had done his first race with us as well. I'd got the emotion done, and then Varese I really enjoyed, because it was a bit of a like, right, I've got a job to do, let's crack on. And I felt that way in Bled, but it really felt like it wasn't a novelty that I was back. I was just back.
Yeah. Obviously, you've talked very powerfully about how much sport and a sporting mindset has played into how you've dealt with things, which kind of I'm thinking that's been a constant. I'm wondering, maybe it's too early to say, in what ways this has changed you or made you different, in the sense of, both as a person and as an athlete.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I definitely don't sweat the small stuff anymore. I'm probably a lot more. I'd say I've always been pretty level and pretty straight, but I really don't bother with, they're like the little things that can like live rent free in your head. Like, oh, did I annoy this person, or are we okay? Or oh, I should have done this and this and this, and actually just trying to be like, do you know what, like there's much bigger things going on, and actually, focus on the big stuff, basically. And there's definitely a bit of that, and I also just think like it made me really think about what I want to do and what I enjoy. And and a lot of people said to me, oh, why didn't you just stop rowing, like why did you carry on? And I'm like, well, if my first thing was like, oh great, I can stop rowing, and I don't have any emotion about that, and that's fine, then that probably shows me I probably shouldn't still be in the sport. I probably should be doing something else. And I'm really passionate about it, and I love it. And so I think that's definitely been the case. And I'd say that, really weirdly, I know this is going to get a bit deep, but I turned 30 last summer. I wasn't like worrying about turning 30, but I was turning 30, and it's really made me think about how aging is a privilege, is to actually get old. And I've been on this unit. I've been on the young adults unit in Surrey with some amazing women, and particularly the ones I'm most friendly with are the ones who are that bit older, understandably. And I remember, so like, they're all stage 4 cancers.
Wow.
2 breast cancer and 1 with cervical cancer. And they are incredible, and they are your example of living your life to the full. And I look sometimes at, people say to me, oh, this isn't this. And I'm like, you think, what? No, you should see them. Like you should meet Nikki and Lorna. They're incredible. And it's really humbling. And my friend Mickey passed away earlier this year, and she had stage 4 triple negative, and it's really humbling, and it really does make you think. It's such a cliche, oh, life is short and all those sorts of things, but
yeah,
true. It's so true. And actually it's really, really made me think about that a lot.
Yeah, I was as you were talking, I was just reflecting. I was with Sarah Winklis in Lucerne. I don't know if you know Sarah at all.
Yes. Yeah.
And she's got Huntington's gene, and we were going to. I said, "Have you been to the coffee stall to Rob's Hood?" Which she didn't know about, which Janine Gamellan was doing in honor of Robin Dow. And she was really quite affected by it. And I think, she left saying, it's, look at this, where we are. Life is so good. It's such a privilege.
Yeah.
And, very much the sentiments that you were espousing then.
Yeah, 100%. And like, you just don't know what's around the corner. You really don't. And that's where with my own career, like I look at it and I go like, I love it and I love my job, and I'm so blessed to be able to do it. Um, at whatever time I choose to, like move on and move away, like I hope that I find something else that I love just as much, because
Mm,
it really is a kind of unique and incredible thing that we get to do, which is basically just mess around in boats with your friends.
yeah.
Get to race some other countries, and yeah, and it's an incredible sport to be a part of, and like that's why I love Henley. Like, I literally live just over the river, and I spent a few afternoons just sort of over there last week, not even just seeing friends, but just seeing it. And like, I love seeing people love our sport.
Mm,
um, it's just so joyful. Even, the ones who are crying on the bank because they didn't get through qualifiers and all those
mm,
sorts of things, but you're like, you care so much and you've done that with someone else, and it's amazing.
mm. I'm conscious. I wanted to talk about so much, and it's been very compelling what you've spoken about. I kind of feel I need to ask you about the Paralympics.
Hmm.
That as the apex of an achievement of any sportswoman or sportsman.
Yeah.
Um, it was very odd, of course. I was there for the Olympics, but not the Paras. How was that experience for you?
Yeah, I think odd's probably a really accurate word. It was amazing. I think I was just grateful to be there, because we really did think at one point, in the lockdown, that are they just going to cancel it? Is it going to
Mm,
happen at all? And then, when it was running, that you're just grateful to be there and be healthy, and everyone's not got COVID, and we're racing, and we don't have the benefit really of spares in the para games, like in terms of, because we don't have kind of the depth of numbers. So that does put you more on edge. And yeah, it was amazing. It was very bizarre though. And I actually think, though, I reflect on it, and yeah, the racing and the training was good, and obviously, we got an incredible outcome, but I think my kind of prevailing memories really are actually, we couldn't really socialize outside of,
mm,
we didn't want to socialize with the sports, we didn't want to socialize, everyone was really, fearful of that, and you didn't want to catch COVID. So we ended up, we all lived in a flat together, which was the four. And because I'm just the mom of the group, like I brought like pictures of bunting and like decorated. And my husband had been serving out in Iraq the previous year, and he'd taken the Union Jack flag from tour and given it to me, because he was like, then we would both sort of served
oh
under
wow.
the same flag, which was really cool. So we had this massive dusty GB flag. It did smell a little bit, but we moved on from that. But like, this big, massive Union Jack flag in our flat, and I just felt like I was back at uni. I was having a great time,
Yeah.
just without the alcohol and just with really early nights and really early mornings. But like that I think was some of my I loved that, like being together and just thinking like, this is the craziest snapshot in time that I hope will never happen again. I hope we'll
Mm,
be relegated to being a pub quiz question in 40 years. And it was just a moment in time, and it was that, and then it was getting home. And I think the biggest thing when I got home was, you feel really isolated when you're out there and competing. And whilst you've got a few people messaging on Instagram and things like that, I wasn't really on my phone all that much. I was just trying to like
mm,
all in. And you get home, and it sounds really stupid to say, but you're like, oh, did you watch? Oh, thanks. Like, and everyone's like, yeah, it's Paralympics. Like, everyone's watching. The world was watching. And
yeah.
oh, right. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, good. It felt like we were just doing it for us. And then we got home, and, the whole of Great Britain had been watching, and that was really weird.
Yeah. You mentioned your husband there. I don't know if this is the correct term to use. I'm wondering if he's the unsung hero in all of this.
Yeah. Sam's just been, anyone who knows Sam or meets Sam is like, he's just the nicest man in the world anyway. Like, he's just like, everyone loves Sam. They prefer him as a Kennedy, unfortunately. That's why I don't get him around too much, because people like him more than me. But no, he was amazing. And I actually think, I always talk about, I went to Serbia and I raced. What I actually did is leave my husband at home, and he then talked to a lot of our friends and family and broke the news to them. And he's been incredible. Like, he came to every single chemo. He was working a really busy job. He's in the army, but he was working for an MP at the time. So he was flying all over the place, because obviously everything was happening with Ukraine at the time. And yet he sort of, thrived in his job and did everything for me. And he was amazing. We've been together since we were 17, and we've sort of grown up together. And he's always laughed, because he's like, we got married just before the pandemic, and he was saying, well, I really put that in sickness and in health this year. But yeah, and he's just been, he's been amazing. And I think actually the mastectomy was really tough for him, not the reality of the surgery or anything, but I think it was lovely for him because I was starting to get better, getting energy back. I was becoming more like myself. And then obviously I had to have this massive surgery, and then it knocked me back again. But yeah, he's been amazing. And I'm very grateful to have had him with me during all of this.
You're a world champion several times. Was the first one in 2017?
2018.
So one thing I wanted to ask you about that, the race in Plovdiv, I think, was probably the closest race that you had. It was a couple of seconds, I think, to the Americans.
Yeah.
And when you won in 2019, and when you won in 21 and 22, you were a long way in front of your opposition. How is that competing against opposition who you're pretty comfortably in control of by 1,000 meters?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I would expect that the World Championships of 2018 is going to be a lot more reflective of a lot of the Paralympic events this year and next year, based on what we've seen. Germany have been really, really good in the summer racing that we've seen. The Americans we haven't seen before put in a really great performance in Paris. The French are also massively on the up. So, the rest of the world are moving on. And like Paralympic rowing is still quite young, and it's, in the grand scheme of things, it feels, to us like it's been part of the games for ages, but its first games was in Beijing. So it's not all that long ago when you think about how long rowing's been in and how long it's taken, Olympic rowing to develop. So it is really exciting. I think for us, we have always thought about, okay, how do we drive the standards of the event? How do we push in front? And we've been, a lot of the time we've been racing ourselves, racing for time, racing for records, and sort of being a bit unapologetic about it, because we want the rest of the world to move up. And maybe catch me like halfway through the World Championships when everyone's absolutely flying, and I remind me of what I'm saying now. But actually, we're here for the sport, we're here for good competition, and the rest of the world's definitely stepping up, which is really exciting. But yeah, it just takes a bit of a different mindset, but it's a similar, it's really interesting. And I'm not comparing myself to Max Verstappen here, but I'm a big Formula One fan. And he gets asked every week, oh, does it get boring winning? And he's like, no. As a young boy, I dreamed about winning one Formula One, and now I'm winning them on the bounce. And isn't it fantastic? And to some extent, it's hard, I think, to look at it and be like, is that still enjoyable, or is that still, because we train like we're going to, we try and train like, we're in the middle of the pack. We don't train like, oh, we'll win anyway, so if we miss that session, because we try to not take anything for granted, because we know that one day, and it could be very soon, the rest of the world are getting really fast, and we're going to need every ounce of training that we possibly have to try and keep that gold medal around our necks.
Yeah. I know you've got your boat race winning oar behind you from the Oxford Women's race in 2014.
Yeah.
How important is that to you?
Oh, Christine Wilson, who I mentioned earlier, and Natasha Townsend. She was a GB rower. She rode in Beijing and London in the 8. Them two kind of women, I think, have been seminal for me in my career, but also kind of who I am as a cox and the cox that I want to be, how I hold myself, how I operate, how I manage my athletes, all those sorts of things. They taught me all that and more, and I'm so very grateful to them and those women, because really before then I was, a pretty new cox, relatively novice, and they kind of saw potential in me and really kind of drove me to kind of who I am today. And I definitely kind of look to them both as sort of, hugely significant in my life, and very grateful for them, and they're amazing women.
And I gather that year you even beat a sort of squad crew.
Yeah, we did actually. It was actually, I was racing Henry Fieldman.
Oh, wow.
That was the first time I'd ever raced against him. And weirdly, I ended up racing against a lot of women who ended up in the team, went to the games when they were all in that sort of development pathway stage. So Catherine Douglas, Karen Bennett, Fee Gammond, I think Becca Chin, Cara McMurtry. They were all in this sort of hybrid development, sort of, they're too old for under 23s. They're not quite in the team, they're on the edge sort of thing. And I remember it was at Met Regatta actually. And I remember essentially we just had an incredible start. We got 5 lengths up. That would have been a lot. 5 seats up. And we were all like, whoa. And then we just like held them. And then I experienced what I can only describe as the slowest row through of my entire life. And I was like, oh, here we go. And we had quite an early sort of push for the line at like 600. And I remember us looking at 750 and like momentum with them. And I just remember like, a lot of what I do with coxing was trying to manage my tone and all of this. And so obviously I was going like, and then I remember going like switching it from like here, being like, okay, listen to me, just trust me, but we're going to need to do the finish now. Okay, ready, go. And then I remember like the fear in my stroke girl's eyes being like, what are you doing? We've got like over a third of the race left. And then we ended up winning by about a canvas. It probably goes down as one of my favorite races I've ever raced in. It was just Met Regatta 2014, but it was just like, it's good being the underdog sometimes. It was really fun.
Yeah. Are you an in-time person or a through time? And I'm kind of asking that. Do you look beyond Paris at all, or just to Paris? What's your?
Yeah, I'm definitely. So I always thought I'd retire after Paris originally, and move on to new things. But I think at the moment where I am is, I feel a bit robbed essentially. Like I have gone from, I had 2018 I was trialing, 2019 was like the year I was in my seat, we were having a lovely time, set a world best time. 2020 pandemic, 21 pandemic games, 22 cancer. I'm finally in 23. I haven't exactly had a smooth start to the season, because this season so far I've had 11 chemotherapies and a double mastectomy. So I wouldn't say it's been smooth sailing. And then next year's the games, and I'm just sort of sat here being like, is this it for me? Do I really want to retire after Paris? I don't think so at the moment. I think I'm not closing the chapter just yet, but we'll see. There is a bit of a pull of Los Angeles because it's that 1500 meter course, which is just going to be really different, and could be quite cool. Less words for me to say, but it's going to make for more ferocious racing. I think that will also in the para events be really good, because it's going to bring everyone a little bit closer together in the field. So yeah, I'm definitely a through Paris, and then we'll see what happens.
And I think just finally, you have become, I'd say, a bit of a celebrity. How have you handled that celebrity status?
I definitely don't feel like it. I would say I have a very weird cross section on Instagram of people who are interested in cancer and people who like rowing. That's a bit of a merge. But I I feel very privileged, to be honest. I genuinely at the Europeans, I did an interview with Matt Pinson, and it aired earlier in the week, and I genuinely, I knew someone at the BBC, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to air it now," and I just did not expect my DMs to go off quite like they did. Like, I almost doubled the number of followers I had in like a 20 minutes or something, and I was like, this is weird. And then obviously I raced, and I genuinely was racing, and I still am, because I love my sport. Like, I love my job, and I feel really lucky to do it. Like, you know, and I think that one friend of mine from church said to me at one point, instead of being like, why me, and being like, ooh, why me? You know, a lot of people can say, oh, it's really unfair. I've got cancer. It's really this and this. She was like, just think like, why me? Like, why me? What can I do about it? And actually, it's been a real privilege, and hopefully, you know, educational and or having an impact in people's lives by talking about it, destigmatizing it, bringing it to the public consciousness, and getting to do that whilst I also row is a bit of a treat. So yeah, I never get bored talking about it, because it's my life. It's been a huge part of it, but also it's a real privilege to get to share it, and I hope you know, make a bit of an impact in our sport and beyond.
You mentioned something there, and I kind of thought I meant to ask about that, and I can ask about it now. How important, you're a person of faith, how important has your faith been, or how much has it helped you or not through all this?
Yeah, it's really helped me, to be honest. Like, it's been something that you know, I've gone to church since I was little, and I go to an amazing local church in Henley, and they've been incredible as a community as well, getting around me, and that's been something that's really amazing. So whenever I had chemo, the day I had chemo and the day after, and then for 2 weeks after my mastectomy as well, people from the church, like friends, community members, and all of that, brought dinner to my house every night of that week. So they provided me probably over like 50 meals over like a 6-month period. Different people just stepping up and helping, and it's just sort of knowing people are there for you and supporting you is just, yeah, it's just been amazing. So it's been something that's, you know, been really, really important for me, and just helped me sort of mentally sort of navigate it as well.
Well, Erin, it's very humbling listening to you. You have an incredible facility, I think, to communicate, and in a powerful and you know, it almost light-hearted in what's, you know, can be quite a heavy and serious subject.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, like, I was always like, you know, I always used to say the athletes, choose your mood, and then I was like, oh, bloody hell, I better choose my mood then. And I think it's been so useful for me just to get through it all, because you know, you've got to, your mind is your most powerful tool.
So we'll end the live part of this interview now. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Erin, for being on Crossy's Corner. It's been amazing to listen to you. Bye for now, everybody.